What helps you build wealth during your working years can actually create uncertainty once you start withdrawing income from that wealth. How would you react if the market fell 20%, 30% in the first year after you retire? Do you know what the impact would be on your portfolio? I'm Dustin Rudolph, and welcome to Summit Ascent Retirement. In this episode, we're going to discuss why utilizing set it and forget it withdrawal strategies, such as the 4% rule, can create angst in different market scenarios. The same strategies that work to grow your portfolio can make income planning feel unpredictable. Let's unpack why and what you can do to regain control.
So what is the 4% rule? It was published by William Banger back in 1994, and he was looking for a consistent, predictable way to advise clients to take money out of their portfolio and still have money left over after 30 years. And what he came up with based off of statistical analysis was a retiree could take 4% of whatever their portfolio value was. So if you had $1 million, that would be $40,000, and then increase that amount by whatever the inflation is each and every year. And you should have money left over after 40 years. Now, a lot of people have heard this and it's still being used. I recently saw a statistic that 60% of advisors are still using this rule in some way, shape, or fashion. Now that we know what the 4% rule is, let's take a look at what is the sequence of returns and why should you care. Sequence of returns says, based off of the gains and losses in your portfolio when they happen, could have a detrimental impact because if they happen towards the beginning of your retirement, your portfolio may not have time to recover and you could potentially run out of money. So you have the 4% rule that says this is how much we can take without running out of money, and sequence of returns risk, on the other hand, that says, well, if this happens in this order, you could potentially run out of money. So which is it? Meet Bill and Sally. They've accumulated $1.5 million in savings. They have $40,000 in Social Security payments, and they're looking for income from their portfolio to sustain their retirement until they die. Before we go into how Bill and Sally can utilize the 4% rule and how sequence of returns risk could potentially derail their retirement plans, I want to show you why retirement income phase is so much different than accumulation. If your portfolio grew by inflation and inflation was 2%, then $102 would have the same buying power as $100 did a year ago. If our return plus our withdrawals is less than inflation, we would have less buying power. This is important because we are relying on our portfolio for raises in the future versus our wages. All numbers in these examples going forward are inflation adjusted, meaning that they are real or accounted for inflation in buying power compared to today. So why do the order of returns matter when you're taking income and not during accumulation? Well, the best way to show you is to give an example of the same returns during accumulation phase. So what we're looking at here is you retire in 1999 with that $1.5 million, just like Bill and Sally. And let's face it, 1999 was not a great year to retire. You had 3 down market years from 2000 to 2002. However, with the exception of 2008 and 2022, the market recovered nicely, and you're ending up with inflation-adjusted dollars of about $4.2 million. Flipping those returns upside down, starting in 2024, where you have the 15% return, and then 2023, where you have the 18% return, your account value is growing very different at the beginning. However, you still have the same gains and losses, and you end up after 25 years of the same $4.2 million in retirement. With the same combination of gains and losses, without withdrawals, the end value will always be the same. But taking a look at these graphs, this is why sequence of returns is one of the 4 horsemen of retirement, because negative returns at the beginning while you're taking income can have a severe impact on your overall portfolio value. Take a look in the blue line, which is the 2000 to 2024. started off with $1.5 million. Bill and Sally are taking their $60,000 per year, adjusting for inflation, which in our examples is 2.4%. With those 3 negative years in a row, that $1.5 million drops to about $1 million. Now, luckily for individuals that retired in 1999, the returns, except for 2008 and 2022, pretty much leveled off, and we had enough upside that the portfolio actually sustains itself and has about $900,000 left over that period. Now, if you flip those returns upside down, the exact same gains and losses, and as we saw before, if you're not taking withdrawals, that has no impact on the remaining account balance. It makes a huge difference as you're withdrawing income. Now, as you have that 15% and that 18% at the beginning of your retirement, your $60,000 isn't putting much of a dent in that. And your portfolio value doubles to almost $3 million before leveling off after 25 years at $2 million. Completely different experience from one retirement to another retirement, having different confidence and outlook on how their money's going to sustain itself. So here's the issue with sequence of returns. In one 25-year combination, there are a septillion, actually 15 septillion different ending balances and combinations that can exist. Now, we looked at two of them, the light blue line and the green line. Well, best case scenario means that our best years start at the very beginning and decrease all the way down to our worst year. In this case is 2008. So if that were to happen, the portfolio value with the same gains and losses exceeds $6 million adjusted for inflation before coming back down to about $3 million. Worst case scenario, where we start with 2008 and then have the next worst year, we're running out of money in about 11 years. And the important thing to note here is these are the same returns, same inflation, same income. Any change to one of these variables is going to create another infinite amount of outcomes. And this is only one 25-year market environment of combination of gains and losses. There could be market environments a lot better where you're seeing over $10 million, whatever it may be, and there could be market environments that are a lot worse. We don't know what the future is going to hold. That's why it's so important to prepare for it. Here are some takeaways from the 4% rule in sequence of returns risk. One, you do run the risk of running out of money should those negative returns pile on top of each other at the beginning of your retirement without making adjustments. Secondly, more times than not, what's happening is individuals are underspending what they could because they're afraid for those environments where they live too long and they're running out of money. We need a plan that can account for this, that has flexibility, but allows us to take more income up front. And lastly, the 4% rule does not account for life and retirement very well. What do I mean by this? Well, most retirees are spending the most amount of money during the first 10 years of their retirement. This is considered their go-go years. This is when you're taking more trips, you're doing those hobbies, you're getting out and doing what you always wanted to do during retirement. As you get older, you have less energy to go out and do those activities, and so you slow down and you spend less money. And that generally dips back up towards the end of retirement because of potential health events. Also, it does not incorporate your other income streams, such as Social Security. So if you're retiring at 65 years old and you want to wait till age 70 to take advantage of those 8% increases each and every year, how are you going to take 4%? In this example, Bill and Sally would have to live off of $60,000 for 5 years until that Social Security kicked in. Obviously, they wouldn't do that. They would take more from their portfolio, but then again, we're not truly using the 4%, or we have to take 4% from a reduced portfolio in the future. So what does this mean for Bill and Sally's outlook? Well, there's uncertain outcomes for the retirement. More times than not, the 4% will last that 30 years. However, that desire to not run out of money generally means people are taking a lot less income than what's desired or what is possible. So, what can you do differently in retirement to mitigate that sequence of returns risk? Well, we need to focus on what are those differences in the accumulation phase versus the income phase. Imagine for 20 years, you've spent so much time in the weight room, putting on bulk, eating high protein meals, lifting heavy, building muscle mass, and you get big and strong, and your body becomes built for these short, optimized, powerful bursts, not endurance. Now, all of a sudden, somebody today comes in and says, you're going to run a marathon. You can't take that same body built for heavy lifting and expect to run 26 miles efficiently. You need to retrain, shift your nutrition, change your workouts, and build stamina along with your strength. During the working years, you're in the weight building phase of accumulating assets, maximizing growth, and taking on risk to get stronger financially. It's like bulking up in the gym. The volatility and the risk is like that muscle because that's ultimately what's driving the growth in your portfolio. But once you hit retirement, the game changes. You're no longer training for power. You're training for endurance, making your wealth last 25, 30, 40 years. You can't keep the same heavy lifting investment routine. You need to retrain your portfolio for stamina and consistency. That's why we developed our strategic portfolio approach built for endurance during retirement while continuing to take risk and capture potential growth. So let's take a look at a strategic portfolio design. So I'm going to show you the impact of using a strategic withdrawal approach. In this example, it's still 2000 to 2024, the exact same returns. However, instead of exclusively using a 60/40 portfolio and withdrawing funds from there, I'm taking about 5 years worth of income of that $60,000 adjusted for inflation and putting it in a low risk asset to withdraw from. So instead of locking in the losses during a down year, I'm taking it from my low risk asset. I'm not locking in losses. However, the rest of my portfolio is participating in the growth. That's why you see at the very beginning, it looks very similar. However, in the blue line, you're continuing to lock in those losses through the withdrawals. And in the light line, the portfolio has the ability to recover because you're not locking in the losses. And at the same time, you're participating in the market growth, ending up with about $1.7 million rather than less than $900,000. So like our marathon example, how do you train differently with your money? In our next episode, we'll talk about structuring income more strategically so you can maintain stability, growth, and peace of mind no matter what the market does. I'm Dustin Rudolph, and this is Summit Ascent Retirement. We'll see you next time.